collaborative fashion. And even if this is the first time you're hearing about open source, I'm pretty sure you guys would have worked with a lot of open source software such as Linux or Python, WordPress, Mozilla, and Git, MySQL, and you will continue to work with them in the tech field. Now, programs like GSoC and Outreachy provide you an opportunity to actually be able to contribute to these organizations.
Harsh, if your mic is unmuted, I think we can't hear you.
Okay, now I guess you can hear me.
Yeah.
Great. So now the question comes, why open source, right? So in the slides, you can see that we have a great open source culture. You get to learn a lot of things. You like build a strong network. So there are people from like a variety of cultures who are there, and there are people from different organizations who are working there. So you build a strong network, which will help you in future. Then comes the experience part that you'll be learning on a real life project. So I mean, it's a great hands-on experience to work on such big projects, which otherwise you'll only get to learn when you go to the industry. So also when you go to the industry, these contributions that you make, this will help you a lot in like figuring out how to get started with reading a big project or a big source code. So these experiences uh, help you a lot, and these experiences are valued as well in the industry. So when you say that I have contributed to such big organizations or such big projects, they'll know, okay, so you are like good at something. Next thing, this is transparent. So I mean, anyone can participate, and it's like equal for everyone. So I think, I mean, it's a great learning experience overall. And so, I mean, in my notes, I've written it's good for everyone. So you write, you contribute, you learn a lot. And then when others users use those softwares, they also, can like have a great experience with, I mean, there are uh, a lot of like advantages of open source softwares. Like right now, I'm streaming this on YouTube through OBS, and OBS is also an open source software. So, I mean, you can see the impact that we can create using open source. Next slide. So these are the various programs where like you or me can participate, as in students can participate and learn. So right now I'm mentoring at Season of KD, which you can see at the right most. So this is like an organization specific program. So KD is an organization, and this Season of KD is organized by uh, these people to like help students get started with open source contributions. There are other like programs. So this Yulia is also an organization who has its own like season of like we have Season of KD. They have this equivalent program for students to learn. So similarly, Outreachy which we'll be going to discuss in details, GSoC, and there are many other such programs.
What should I know before contributing? So before contributing to an open source project, you should be familiar with these four horsemen. The first one is the programming language, like it is the most fundamental technology behind any application. You should know which programming language suits you the best, in which you are comfortable coding with, since most of the time you will be required to understand the previous code base and build upon it. Now, second come is knowing how to use Git, which is a version control system. And meanwhile, GitHub is the most popular platform for these open source collaborations. So you are definitely going to use it while exploring the world of open source software. You should be familiar and comfortable with submitting pull requests, raising issues, and contributing to code base. Third is the type of the project. Like after you know your language selection, you basically get a way to filter out organizations based upon your interest. And then the fourth one is the volume of the project. Like there are many big projects like Mozilla, Python, etc., which might not be the ideal choice for a beginner. So you should be pretty careful about your decisions while selecting organizations. As for beginner contribution, you can hunt for issues labeled with first timer issues or beginners.
All right, so just as Rachita mentioned in the beginning, open source was never just about software. Open source also involves community management since we're working with such huge communities. It involves dealing with finances. I work with Fedora, so Fedora even had a podcast team. So there's really no limit. And one of the things that comes under open source organizations, so just like any other organization, open source organizations also have their design needs. And these have to be dealt with the design team, which also follows an open source pipeline for working. So basically all the work that is there for design is hosted on a platforms similar to GitHub. If they're open to everyone, and the work can be picked up by anyone. And the work ranges from UI UX design to designing the swags and stickers, which first timers tend to be very excited about. And then there can be the day-to-day necessities like posters and pamphlets, event-related needs, and honestly anything that comes up which is design related. And there can be some very interesting things to work on. For example, when I was working with Fedora, we recently had a college event for our alumni. So they also used a similar platform in which we basically created a virtual world. So I wasn't involved in the college one, but for Fedora's conferences, twice we created virtual worlds which were themed. So once we created a Fedora museum, and the other time we created this huge party setup for the release parties and the conference, where people could just walk around and talk. So that is also a design requirement. And there's different softwares. We also use open source software when working on open source design. So can we move to the next slide? So this is about what is involved in open source design. Then how can you get started? So usually Ritik mentioned that when you're starting to contribute to a code base, you could look for issues that are marked as beginner friendly. But when it comes to design, I'd suggest rather than picking up something to work on, you should first try looking for a mentor. Because design communities tend to be somewhat close-knit, and there's also a slight hierarchy, not in the sense that you can't say something or you won't have any pull, but some work just involves logos and things like that, and that has to be done by people who are actually permanently working for the community or senior designers. So that's why you need a mentor to kind of navigate and so that you can understand the community. For example, right now, even if I don't have my mentor with me, and even if I don't ask her, I can decide which thing would be probably be okay for me to work on or start contributing to. So when it's a design community, it's pretty important, I think, to have a mentor. So the way you can find a mentor is you can just join any of the community meetings. Usually they're mentioned the timings and the platform, all of that is pretty openly available. Or you could join the chat that usually happens on IIIT, and Fedora also has Telegram groups. And there's some other platforms also on which these community chats are there. So you can go there and you can start socializing with people, talking to people, and you'll find someone or the other who's willing to be a mentor. If you attend one of the team meetings and you just introduce yourself and that you say that you're interested to contribute, you'll probably be given an issue, and that is how you should start contributing to open source design. Because if you straight away push an issue, they might see it in a slightly hostile way. And I've seen this happening, especially if you pick up an issue on it, someone's already working it. You don't know who that is. That could be the person who's the head of the design team. You just basically need to get connected with the community first. Then there's a question about why should one be contributing to open source design. So assuming that you are interested in design, when you're contributing to open source design, you can actually, and not just can, you will end up getting excellent feedback and detailed feedback from highly experienced designers. So for example, some of the people in Fedora's design team have been designers for over 2 decades, not over 2 decades, but for nearly 2 decades. And they have a world of experience with them. So you get to learn a lot like that, and it's amazing for networking because it's hard to find contacts like this otherwise. And these are very awesome people. Most of them, when I've spoken to them, they've frequently offered, like, that if I need any help in looking for a job or an internship, they're up for it, and they frequently share opportunities and things like that. So once you get involved, it's very good for your professional development, and you could just, like, you might just get involved permanently in that community itself. Apart from that, as I mentioned earlier, there's a variety of projects. There's like projects for any sort of requirement that is there in the community. So it really fuels your growth, because when I was working for Fedora, I designed mascots, I designed badges, I made that map, I did UI, UX, I did a lot of UI UX design. I did some, like, design research as well. So it really fuels your growth as a designer, and it also helps you find what you enjoy the most when you're working on so many things. And there's also some work, and you also get to see that work turn to reality. For example, whatever you're making, you see people use it. So that's also a great feeling. So that's why I think it's very beneficial to contribute to open source design. Right, so about Outreachy, can we have the next slide? So you need to be over 18 to contribute to Outreachy, and you need to have been subjected to bias or discrimination in the tech industry. So usually when we read the words bias or discrimination, we think about a very, like, particular person. We think about race, and we think about gender and things like that. We can even think about, like, person's orientation. But honestly, Outreachy is not just limited to that. For example, one of the people who was an intern in my community, he was a he was a cis-het straight white male, and he was there. But this guy had a very different work background, in the sense that earlier he had done a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in humanities, and he had studied arts. He was an artist, and he had recently switched to tech. And that gave him a different background, and he had been subject to bias, and he shared his story in his initial application and with his mentors, and he also became an intern. So it doesn't just have to be what you think bias or discrimination is. Typically it could be anything. The procedure that Outreachy follows is that first you have to fill an initial application, which is basically some essays. I think you have to write 4 or 5 essays and share some details about yourself. Then you have a contribution period for about a month, after which you summarize all the work that you did in the contribution period, and you draft your final proposal. Which is, I think, there aren't a lot of essays. This is basically about summarizing your the work you did over the contribution period. Then if you get selected, you will get to intern from 3 months, from 30th May to 26th August. You'll get paid $7,000 for the entire duration of the internship. And the deadline for this year's Outreachy program is for the initial application is 25th February.
Okay, so the initial application is very specific to Outreachy, and this is basically a way for the people to find out if you have actually faced any sort of bias or discrimination in the tech industry, and that is exactly what you have to convince them of over here. In the initial application. So the bias or discrimination, as Dhera gave a very good example of, does not necessarily have to be gender or religion-based or caste-based minority or whatever. It is basically something that puts you at a disadvantage from others in succeeding in the tech industry, right? So the very first thing that you should be doing is to communicate clearly what kind of bias or discrimination is it that you have faced. So in the very first question, make sure that you mention clearly what kind of discrimination it is in the very first few lines, and then you'll get a lot of more ways to like elaborate on it. And yeah, the 2 other important things that should be mentioned in your initial application are be sure to include numbers and statistics. For example, if you are from a minority community, like a religious minority, then you can write down that people of my religion constitute so and so percentage of Delhi, or whatever city or state you belong to. Make sure that it is specific to your location at least. And every time you mention numbers or stats, be sure to follow it up with some real life incidents, to show how that, being from that minority has actually personally put you at a disadvantage. For example, if you're talking about gender discrimination, then instead of generally saying that the sex ratio is terrible in all engineering colleges across India, you can mention the specific sex ratio in your college and then follow it up with an incident. For example, because of the low sex ratio, you feel alienated from your classmates, you don't feel confident enough to speak up in classroom, or there is a lack of female role models in your life, in your college you don't have enough female professors who you can look up to and who can guide you, or people you can relate to who face the similar problems. So yeah, you have to always do mention numbers, but balance it with writing down real life incidents as well. And be very, very honest and authentic. Do not just go on Google, type the question and copy anyone else's answer. They can always understand and make out when something is real and when something is made up. Do not cook up stories. Even if it is a small incident, be sure to explain how it has impacted you in a bigger way. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think if there's anything that I would like to add to that, Shikha.
Yeah, so I think Rachita covered this pretty well. I completely agree. When I spoke to seniors, the one main thing that they told me to do is that I should be including short stories about my life, and I should be emphasizing on my personal experiences, and which is what I did in my application. And I built up a story from when I was younger to when I grew up. I built that up in my application. And another thing that I noticed that Rachita shared was about local issues. For example, she mentioned caste. So caste does not really exist all over the world. It's mostly, I think, limited to the Indian subcontinent. So if you're sharing a local problem, that is completely fine. In fact, I think it's appreciated, when you're talking about yourself in particular. Moreover, I think one more important thing which I did not take into account during our application period was taking feedback from seniors and other and past interns. So I did not really do this with my initial application, but I think this would be something useful if you could have a few people go through it and make sure that it looks authentic, and have some past interns look at it and see if it checks all boxes. I think that would help make a good application. Then we have about the contribution period. So once your initial application gets selected, you have the contribution period. In the contribution period, you can select up to 3 projects to contribute to. But when I asked seniors about this, they told me to not pick up 3 projects and start contributing to all of them, because we also have college during this period, and it's nearly impossible to be contributing to 3 open source projects and also be studying in college, especially IIIT Delhi. I did pick up initially I did pick up 3 projects only to streamline which one I like to work for the most. Not just I joined other chats as well. I think I joined 6-7 groups, and I finally came to the conclusion that I like these 3 groups in particular. And honestly, a part of my decision was also driven by the fact that we were going to have our internship interviews later, and I wanted to have some time to study as well. So I factored in a lot of things while deciding the projects that I could be working on. And slowly over time, I lost interest in the other 2 projects, and I found myself contributing to 1 project. Another thing to keep note is that Outreachy in particular, from what I've seen, is extremely competitive. Especially some organizations, because there are a lot of people who fill out the application and a lot of people who start contributing, and even even the numbers that stay till the end are pretty large. And the number of projects is not at that high, so it can get extremely competitive. Sometimes there's people fighting over issues and things like that. So you have to choose your project very carefully. And if you're going for an organization like Mozilla, or even I heard that for a project like UNESCO or even Fedora, there were a lot of people. For example, in my project, my mentor had to sit down for 2 complete days to do 1 round of feedbacks. That's a number of applicants that were there for the project. So the project has to be chosen very carefully, and if you're applying to an organization that like that, it's better to have a backup project which you're contributing to less but which is also less popular. Another thing to keep in mind is that during the contribution period, you should be staying in touch with your mentors. They should know who you are and that you're there and you're contributing, and you should take some guidance from your mentors. Eventually, my mentor also helped me find work during the contribution period only. Like helped me find some extra work that I could add to my application, and she suggested it. So she noticed what my skill set was and what would interest me, and she gave me some extra work. So that was only because she knew who I was and because I was in touch with her throughout. Other than that, you should be contributing regularly. So you should try to contribute throughout that 1 month of the contribution period. It shouldn't be that you come for 1 week and you contribute more than anyone else and then you leave for the other 3 weeks. Ideally, you should be there for the entire period, and even if you're making small contributions throughout the time, what they want as an organization is people who will stay, not people who will contribute a lot in a short period of time and then go. So you have to keep that in mind as well, that you have to be present throughout the period. And if you're going to go away, for example, if you have your final exams or you're sick for some time, you should tell your mentors that I'm not going to be around. And you can also ask them if there's any light work, could you let me know, because I don't want to be behind on my application. You can just say it. Another thing that I realized, which I did not expect during the contribution period, was since there are so many people, conflicts arise because they want to be doing the same work. There are some issues that interest everyone, so everyone wants to pick them up. So this happened with me, and then people get somewhat fighty. And in our case, since there were so many people, they said that you can work on the same issue. Multiple people can be working on the same issue, and that was even worse because people got very competitive and toxic. So but thing being that you don't have to stoop down to that level. Your mentors are constantly monitoring everything, even if there are a lot of people, and they have been doing this for some time now. So your mentors notice and realize when things like that are happening, and it's just better to if something's really bad, you should communicate it to your mentor and tell them what's happening. But it's best to just be quiet. Mentors are people from the organization side who will be guiding you and helping you throughout the internship. So every project has some mentors. That was a question in the chat. Who are mentors? Then another thing is that when you're done with the contribution period, you should start working on your final application at least 1 week prior to the deadline and get it approved by your mentors. This is because you make a lot of contributions, and then if you sit down on the last day and you start recording them, it's going to get very difficult for you to write down all of them, and you might not even be able to do justice to your work, which is not a very good thing, because you worked on all that and then you can't even show it for what it's worth. And another advice I got from a senior was to show my final application to my mentor and ask them if it's fine. So that is something I did, and my mentor suggested some changes. But it's just it involves your mentor more with you. Finally, you should also try to make some contributions after the deadline for the final application. This was not something anyone suggested to me. In fact, I asked the person, I was in contact with Sonali at that time, and I asked her, and she said it's up to you if you want to. But this was something that was written as a suggestion on the Outreachy website, and I did this, and I think it might leave a good impression. If Rajita has anything to add, that's all from my side.
Yeah, I think Dhaya covered it pretty thoroughly, and I don't have a lot to add to it. I had a similar experience there in some aspects. I didn't experience a lot of fighting in my case. In fact, I think it's also good if if other people in your community. I know it's a competition, but even if there are other people in your community who are trying to figure out something like how to push a certain code or like one specific thing which you have already figured out. I think it's also good if you help them out and give them the instructions in the community channel, because that is also something that the mentor notices, that you're helping others out. So yeah, I think I had a positive experience in that respect, because in both the projects that I contributed, people were in fact helping each other out. Yeah, there were a lot of people who were, okay, luckily in my case, I was contributing to two projects. One was Wikimedia, which has been there since I think the very beginning of Outreachy, and they've participated in a lot of rounds. And the other was UNICEF, and it was their first time coming to Outreachy. So they were like, the mentors were still a little inexperienced on how to assign work. They didn't have a lot of issues tagged specifically for Outreachy participants, and they were overwhelmed with the number of people who were willing to contribute. So initially, in the first few weeks, I contributed solely to Wikimedia, because there were not a lot of places where I could contribute in UNICEF. But by the end of it, when I was done with my contributions to Wikimedia, the mentor at UNICEF made a lot of issues, created a lot of issues specifically for Outreachy participants, and I could like divide my time equally between both the organizations in the contribution period. So that was lucky for me that I chose some like diverse kind of groups to work with. And yeah, that is, I think that's all that I have to add. Okay, so about the Outreachy projects. So if you are good and confident in a particular programming language, then that is great. But even if like you're in your very first year or even second year and not so confident with any of the programming languages, there are a lot of other fields in which you can contribute. For example, there is user experience, there's documentation, graphic design and illustration, which Thera talked about in detail. Then there is data science, and even event planning and project marketing is available. So yeah, there is a very diverse skill set which is required in the different projects, and you can choose one based on your level of experience and what you are interested in. And if you go to the Outreachy website, then you will find all of this information there, but I'll just read it out once, that every project has 3 categories of skills. One is required, which are the ones which you should have a good level of skill in if you are applying to the project. Then the second is preferred, that the mentors prefer to select people who are from this, who have this skill set, but even if you don't, it's fine. And the third is nice to have, that is, even if you don't have it, then it's completely fine, you still can get selected, and they might teach you that particular skill later on if you require it for the project. And these skills are also labeled with these numbers from 1 to 5, where 1 is no knowledge is required. That means that they'll teach you the skill and help you out, guide you through it. And 5 is you should have a good challenging level of understanding of that particular skill. So when you are shortlisting projects, then you can keep in mind these levels of what skill you need and pick them based on your skill set and the experience level required. Yeah.
Also, like just one interesting thing to note there is that actually it does not, like, it's not necessary that even if there's someone more experienced than you in a project, and even if they contribute more than you, they will be selected, because Outreachy is about, like, supporting diversity in tech. So one senior shared with me that in their case there were 2 people at the end, one and another person. There was them and another person who contributed a lot, and the other person was, like, more experienced than them, and that person contributed more than them, but still they got selected. And the reason was that they although they were not more experienced, the program is supposed to benefit you and it's supposed to support you. So the mentor just felt that they would benefit more from the program than the other person, and that's why they were selected. So it's not necessary that even if, like, there are better people than you, it will translate to them being selected.
This is just a timeline. This is a screenshot from the Outreachy website, and you can keep in mind the deadlines for the initial application and by when the projects will be finalized. And as soon as you fill out your initial application, so I would suggest that you fill it out as soon as possible, because once you fill it out, you will come to this page which has like the list of all of the projects which have already been finalized, right? So like the final list comes out on March 11th, but then people keep on adding the, as in when they get confirmed, people keep on adding them to the website. So you will have an idea of which are the major organizations which are already there, what are the different projects, and yeah, this is just a timeline that you can refer to keep in mind if you have any exams, or by when you should be able to contribute if you have exams coming up or something else. Yes, of course, first years can take part in Outreachy. And okay, so yeah, that is unfortunate that you will be having your exams and classes during the contribution period. But I would suggest that do not give up so soon. Like you can at least try and start contributing. If during the middle of it you find that it's too heavy, or you're not able to keep up with it at all, then that's fine. You can focus on the exams then. But yeah, if you're in your first year, even if you don't get selected, you have next year. You can apply to Outreachy as many times, but you can intern only once. So keeping that in mind, it will be a good practice for next year, and you'll already be familiar with most of the things. So I would suggest that you do at least give it a try, even if you're in your first year. Yeah, that's it on my end.
Okay, so next up we have Google Summer of Code. So the first disclaimer that I want to give is that Google Summer of Code, if you participate in Google Summer of Code, you will not be working for Google. So that's the first thing that you have to keep in mind. Often, like freshers are confused that will we be working with Google or Google employees? No, you will not be working with Google. So let me explain how this comes. So actually, Google says that we have benefited from open source organizations in our initial days a lot. So now we want to give back to the community. So they have like incorporated this program. So I mean, just it's a very small team inside Google which works on this program, and their job is to just like mediate through the organizations and the students. So they are just the mediator. So you apply on Google's portal, and the organizations also apply on Google's portal. The payment is done by Google, but you will not be employed by Google. So I mean, this should be clear to everyone. So you will be working with open source organizations as you were working in Outreachy. So similar to Outreachy, we have like several organizations participating in GSoC, and I mean, uh, I think we have more organizations participating in GSoC. And the thing is that it's not just about, it's not just about like you are working for Google or not. It's also about like you are learning how much you're learning or not. So that's the important thing. So let's look at a few things here. So eligibility criteria is 18 plus. So this is, I believe, this was the case before. I mean, this was the case last year, but I'm not sure about this year. So this year regulations have changed, and now you're no longer required to be a university student to apply to GSoC. So I mean, the competition is going to be much fierce this year, I believe, because it's open to everyone, and like even if you are uh, outside university, if you have graduated already and you want to contribute, you can still contribute. So uh, and then we have this like duration, so May 20 to September 20, and then the third date is also there. So let me explain this. So we have this year we have two forms of participation, two modes of participation. One is like you'll participate for a shorter duration. So, and the other is you'll participate for a longer duration. So you can extend your project. So if you think like your project needs more time and you want to work more on it, you can extend your project this year. The actual rules are not yet like out, so we can wait for that. So, but we have this initial information that there will be two forms of project. There will be a shorter project, so which you'll work from May 20 to September 20, and then that would be finished. And if you want to extend your project, you can work till November 28 on the same project. So stipend is again from last year's statistics. So we don't have the stipend for this year as of now. So they are still yet to announce that. And the important thing is application period. So April 4 to April 19. So again, important thing to keep in mind is the contribution doesn't start from April 4. If you're contributing from April 4, then I mean there's very less chance that you will be selected. So for an example, when I was participating last year, the date was similar. So we had an application date till 14th, I believe, or March 31, I'm not sure. But I started contributing from December. So I started contributing from December that year in 2020, and the application period was maybe in March or April, something like that. So I started contributing during my winter break. And I mean, you guys are not late, so I was just a little too early. You guys are not too late. You can still start contributing and you know contribute something meaningful before the application period. So when you so why is this important? So this is a good question. So the importance comes that when you write in your application that I can do this, I will do that. So it's just like imaginary. You haven't showed them what you can do. So if you make a few contributions before the application period, then they'll be more confident about what you are writing. So if you say I can do this task, I'll add these features, or maybe like for design students, I can design this stuff. So if you have already done some work, they can refer to that. So you are capable of doing something. So that is a good point. Next slide.
Yeah, you're definitely not late to contribute. Like I started in early March, so you don't need to worry about that. And I would just also like to reiterate over the new rules to make things more clear. So Google announced three major changes this year in their Google Summer of Code program. The first one is expanding eligibility. So beginning in 2022, Google is opening the program to all the newcomers of open source that are 18 years and older. Earlier, you needed to be 18 plus and enrolled in any university. But from this year, the program will no longer be solely focused on university students or recent graduates. The second is multiple size of projects. Last year, the program was of 10 weeks in two phases with two evaluations. Google is now going to support both medium-sized projects, as Harsh explained, which is of around 175 hours, and large projects, which is of 350 hours. And the third one is increasing flexibility timing for the projects. From this year, they're allowing considerable flexibility in the timing for your projects. Now, based on mutual agreements between the students and the mentors, they can stretch the projects up to maximum of 22 weeks.
Okay, so now the important thing comes how to select a project. So, uh, okay, I'll go through the slide contents later, but first things first, like reach out to your seniors who have already contributed in like open source, and you can like figure out what organizations are there which are relevant to me. So, I mean, there are a lot of organizations. So, actually, I'll tell you my journey. So, I actually tried to, compile or set up the development environment for a lot of projects, and I failed. So that is a big thing. So initially, when you try to set up, it's like very challenging, I'll tell you. So, I mean, in some cases it might be easier, but for like some bigger projects, so I tried to set up and then I failed. So reach out to someone who is experienced in the project. It can be a senior or it can be the project maintainer. So, I mean, the project maintainers might not be available. So like any other developer or the people who are free in the group, just reach out to them and say that I want to contribute and I want to uh, like get started with contributing to your project. So they'll say, okay, like this is the Wikipedia, no, wiki page. So you can like read this stuff and this will help you get started. So this is very important. So don't think like, I mean, what will they say? How will they judge me? It's okay. So when you get started, no one knows everything, right? So when you join the chat and say that I'm facing some issues, they'll tell you maybe just a few packages are missing. You have to install those packages, and otherwise you'll like spend entire nights like figuring out what wrong I am doing here. So it's like different for different environments. If you're setting up on Windows, it might be different. So I mean, maybe the documentation is also missing something. So just reach out to the mentors. They know the projects well, and they can like tell you how to set up the project. And the best way to select a project is just by trying out different projects. So like your skill set is maybe web development. So my skill set was also web development before starting out contributions. But when I tried to contribute to web development projects, they were really huge. Okay. So, I mean, I was not very comfortable with them. I was not very comfortable with, I mean, it was very complicated, first of all. And the second thing is that there is a lot of competition. So as like Dhairya mentioned and Rachita mentioned about competition in Outreachy, I don't think like we have such competition in GSoC. I'm not sure. At least I didn't face such competition, such huge competition. But I mean, in the more popular orgs or which are familiar with a lot of students, then I mean, this might be the case. So select a project which is like relevant to your tech skills. But if you are like not uh, able to build the project or not comfortable with the code, so you can like choose any other project which may with the tech which you're not much familiar with, but you learn on the go. So I chose some cross-platform app. So I was not very comfortable with the stack in the beginning, but I had a mentor who told me that if you have already done web development, this should not be that difficult. So I believed in him, not in myself, and, and I started like reading the code, and I started making out sense what the code was. So I mean, this is the correct way to start or choose a project. So just try out to set up the development environment in your system. Try to read the code which you got from the repository, and like try to make sense out of try to make some sense out of their code. So it's not like you in the first go you will be like master and you can read everything and understand everything, but like just try to make out something out of the code. So maybe you'll get the structure, how these files are, like how these files are managed, or I mean how these files are divided into separate folders. So how, if I want to find something related to this, where to find, the mentors will help you with these things.
Okay, so how to communicate within the community. So one of the best thing about GSoC is the group of individuals from diverse cultures and different open source organizations that participate each year. This also means that you cannot make any assumption about communication. There can be a number of different ways in which the community interacts. It could be either through mailing list, or they could be using IRC, Gitter, or maybe like Slack channels, etc. You will most likely find these guidelines mentioned by the organization itself when they apply. You will find the mentors assigned to the particular project whom you can refer to regarding your proposals, PRs, and progress. Like you will see the organization, they have number of projects, and you'll find the list of mentors, and they have also mentioned the communication guidelines where you can reach out to them. So just introduce yourself nicely, and do not expect instant responses. You can start either on, let's say, mailing list, for example, and connect with your mentor. And one of the best way to destroy your reputation early is to repeatedly ask the questions on the chat or channel that are already covered in FAQ or any other kind of documentation.
Okay, so I mean, I think we have already covered how to contribute. So there'll be some initial, like you can search for good first issues or something like that. So I mean, the different projects use different kind of tags for beginner-friendly issues. So you can search for those specific tags, and also you can, if you are not, I mean, if you cannot figure out anything, just ask your mentor. So I'm new to this project, and I want to contribute. So this is my skill set. Can you suggest some issues? So this is only for the first initial few days. So don't do this, like don't make this a habit that you ask your mentors repeatedly. So what should I do? What should I do? Just in the initial days, you can ask like, if I'm a newcomer, what things can I contribute to? So I mean, I'm assuming that you already know what issues are. So you can filter these issues by good first issue, or in my organization we have junior jobs. So you can search with these tags and like try to make sense out of it. So also, I mean, generally I've seen that issues are not like well documented. Sometimes the issues are not very well documented, especially in my organization, issues are not very well documented. So sometimes what happens is that the issue might be solved already, but someone forgot to mark that issue is already solved. So just make sure that you ask your mentors or the maintainers, whosoever they are. So you can just put this question in the group. So I want to work on this. Is this free? So they'll let you know if like already if someone is already working on it, or is it actually free. So this is a good habit. So and also as Etik Malik mentioned that like do not repeatedly ask the same question. So you're not going to get a reply within a few hours. So sometimes matlab, sometimes when I ask them to review my code, I can say that I had to wait for at least 3-4 days to get a reply, just to get a reply that I'll review this weekend. So it's like fine. Just like if you have done your work and said that I've done it, so please review. Then they are going to review it. There's no need to panic. So and also, I mean, uh, earlier I used to be scared of my mentors. What will how will they judge me if I say ask something? And so I mean, first thing first, that you should remove this feeling out of yourself that they are going to judge me. So just like ask something. And also a good point raised by Ritik, that you know many issues that you have might already be covered in FAQs or the wiki pages. So just Google out stuff before asking. So if you want to ask something related to anything, just Google out that same question and maybe you'll get an answer there. So if you don't get an answer, then it's fine. Like, you can ask your mentors; they will not be troubled by that.
Yeah, just to add on to the how to contribute part, Harsh covered it pretty well, and do keep all of these things in mind. One thing in specific, that yeah, you should not be intimidated by the idea of it. The open source community is actually very, very supportive, and they encourage people to ask questions, and they do not make fun of people, or for asking something that is silly. Just make sure that you don't ask the same question which has been asked multiple times before. Look through the FAQs before you ask something. But yeah, in general, they will always be someone who will revert back to you and help you solve your doubts. And the most difficult part is actually to make the very first contribution to it. So once you figure out, like, you might have to sit with it for a few days when you're on your first pull request, that how to figure it out. Like, my whole experience was with GitHub. So yeah, how to solve that issue, and then how to push the code, and how to check the code before pushing it, and ask for a review on that code. That first PR, but once when you make it and it gets merged, then it gives you an instant confidence boost. And after that, you'll yourself be more motivated and encouraged to continue making more pull requests and figuring out more things. So yeah, the most difficult part is always, it was for me as well, just making that first contribution.
In fact, just adding on, it's actually fairly difficult to like piss off a mentor. Like they are very patient people, and they like deal with this everywhere. So it's very difficult to like actually make them annoyed or to make them dislike you.
Okay, so how to write a proposal? So, like, when you'll be done with the initial contributions, you'll get some idea about the project, so what this project is about, what they are working on, and like how can I add something. So there are two ways. So first thing is that scan through the issues, or like ask your mentors what are the ongoing issues that you're working on, and like ask yourself, can I do that? Right? And the other way is like you have some out of the box idea, so you use that product already. So maybe it's an application or something, and you use that product already, and you have a new idea that you can share with the mentors, which they are not yet aware of. The second way, or the second idea, is like I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult that you'll come up with something which they haven't thought of. So the first idea should be the way to start. So I mean, I'm not saying that the second way is not good, but the first idea should be the way to start. So look through the issues and talk to your mentors what next things they are planning. So if I give example of my org, so right now we have a product and we are also trying to build a server for it. So the server is being built by experienced people in the organization, and they're not like it's not like open to everyone to contribute. So they want to build an initial skeleton for it, and then they'll ask other contributors to contribute on that. So maybe if you are experienced with web development or maybe backend development, then you can ask them. So I'm willing to contribute. Can I contribute there? So I mean, it's a good thing to ask them. Right, and scan through the issues as we earlier talked, and in the proposal. So especially for me, I mean others can add. So especially for me, I just scanned through the issues, and I found out like tasks which are like big enough. So I mean big enough as in which will take enough time. So we have to like show 175 hours of work for GSoC proposal. So I took like big issues enough so that it can like I can span it over uh, at least a month or something like that. And then I like wrote thorough descriptions about what I'm going to do, how I'm going to solve that task, how I'm going to complete that task, and I like made some initial mock-ups. So that is the way to write a proposal, and like it's all well told by the mentors. So it's like very organization specific or very, I'd say project specific. So like in my project, we needed mockups for our ideas and like things like that. So I had to like create mockups. Then they'll ask you questions like how you're going to implement the specific thing if you've written some sentence there. So I mean, you have to answer those things and include it in your proposal. That's the way to improve your proposal. Right. So this timeline thing, so right, so I told you that I had like two big tasks and then I spanned it over each task I spanned it over a month or so. So I mean, you have to write this in your timeline. So how you're going to complete these tasks in the given 175 hours or 13 or 14 weeks, whatever it is. So okay, don't overestimate your abilities. Leave enough time for code review and testing. Yeah, this is very important. So, say the program is for 2.5 months. So just like keep those extra 15 days for review and testing. Okay, so like don't take too many tasks and like then you'll be you maybe you won't be like there is always something that can go wrong, right? So maybe your first task took like extra 10 days or something, then you can like finish your code within those extra 15 days. So generally we say that okay, we are going to review our code and like we are going to document our code in those extra 15 days, but often happens that we end up coding in the extra like say 10 days and the 5 days are left for documentation and stuff. So it's good to have some buffer time in your timeline so that I mean you initially don't know how much time it's going to take. It's only an estimate. So like keep some extra buffer time in your proposal. Also, these things are like these things come very late. So I mean you'll write your proposal in April or something, so you don't have to worry about that initially. So first, while you're contributing, just like get started with the project, like take up some beginner friendly issues and like so, I mean stuff like that.
Mhm. Right. So Harsh covered the GSoC part of the final application. In Outreachy, there's actually a very specific format for the final application, where apart from your ideas for the project, you also have to mention your own past experience in using open source softwares or contributing to open source organizations. So there you just, if you've not contributed in the past, then you can always mention the softwares that you have used and why you're willing to contribute to something which is open source specifically, right? You can talk about the advantages of open source and why you're driven towards this specific organization, and then you have to talk about your past experience with other projects, other tech related or projects in that specific domain that you are applying for. And yeah, and after that comes the timeline and everything else. And sometimes you are required to give mockups, but even if you are not, if you're working on something like developing a website or an app, then I think it's always good to add like you can create a quick mockup on Figma or using Adobe XD, like a UI or user experience for your web dev project, because that's what I did. We had a web dev kind of project, and I made a quick UI for it and attached a link along with my final application, because that's just something, if you're willing to do something additional and above and beyond, that gives them an idea of how committed you are to the project, that you have a vision for that specific project and you've thought it through. So I think it's always a good idea to add mockups, even if you're not required to do something like that.
Another thing is that for my mentor and for my application, my mentor valued this I got to know later, but because they have to go through a lot of documentation in that period, they prefer very short and concise applications. So you should not be trying to be straying from the point. You should just very concisely and make it as clear as possible and put all the work that you've done. Also, Outreachy does not have a proposal as such. It has a final application of sorts where you just recording your work. So in that you just have to be very careful, and you should be giving yourself due credit. And as I said earlier, you should be leaving ample time to be doing this. Just like Haisha talked about documenting your code for GSoC, that is something that people leave till the end. In Outreachy, I feel like the what people leave till the end is documenting the amount of work that they've done for their final application. And your final application, irrespective of impression and the amount of work you have done, your final application should still be looking good. So that is something that one should take care of.
Right. So this is a segment where we talk about our organizations and our projects. So the first logo that you see on the left is of KDE, and beside that is the logo of GCompre, so the project where I contributed and the organization where I contributed. So right now I'm also mentoring for a season of KDE with the same project within the same organization. So I mean, GCompre is an educational software for kids in the age group 2 to 10 years old. So, I mean, we have around 150 plus activities which are used by teachers in their classrooms to teach like basic stuff to students. In say, for us, it's like kindergarten and the initial few years of pre-primary schooling. So, and also in the primary schooling as well. So they have different names for that. I'm not sure. And so my task was to add like I added around 10 applications to 10 activities for students to this project. So I mean, we are still looking for many more motivated people to contribute to our project. So I think we'll be coming again to GSoC this year. I mean, it's the same from the past like 5-10 years. So I think like in this session, if like many more people are interested in the project, they can check out and like reach out to us through the IRC or the mailing list.
The logo on the top right is of Chaos, in which I did Google Summer of Code last year. So I just looked for the organizations in February when they were announced, and I just got interested due to the very organized structure. The people were really good and welcoming. They used to host a lot of Zoom video calls, and I used to participate in them. I just saw some. I was not fixed on my technology that time. I just saw some project on building automated PDFs, and then I remember that I made my bachelor's thesis last year on latex. Then I was like, okay, we can maybe use this technology to figure out a solution for this. And I really appreciate the flexibility that they gave me to choose my own approach and the choice of language. Like otherwise, usually it is needed to build on you build on something on existing code. But for this one, I just have to write the software from scratch. So that was pretty interesting.
All right, so the next logo is for Fedora. So Fedora is actually a Linux distribution, but there's like a lot more to Fedora. They have like a lot of websites, and they have like other projects as well. So if you're interested in like Core Linux, then also you can get involved with Fedora. You can like get involved with the websites and apps team, because Fedora is pretty large. Like they have a lot of internal websites and apps and different systems that they use. So there's a team for that. My mentor for Fedora had actually been an Outreachy intern very long ago, and she later, like she kept contributing to the community, and finally she became a community manager. And if you want to like get involved with community management, there's projects for that as well. Like there's also like Fedora is like, it has so many different groups. There's even a group for just like inviting people and getting them interested in Fedora. It's called the Fedora Join SIG, where you welcome people, you make them comfortable, and you give them like a welcoming issue or ticket, and help them get started with contributing to Fedora. So like it's honestly very simple. Of course, I work with the design team. There's also a Fedora podcast. There's a videos team, like which is also like it works with the design team. So there's a lot of things that you can be doing. And there's more information on the Fedora website as well. So you just have to get connected with someone from the team, or join like the Telegram group for the join sig, and they can guide you like whichever way you want to contribute. When I first joined Fedora, I actually did not know about the existence of the join sig. I just joined the design team group, and I looked at like the issues. I learned like the way we are supposed to be contributing, because Fedora has their own different like tracking system for a lot of projects, which is called it's called Pagore according to me, but some people call it Peugeot and some people call it God knows what. This is how it's spelled. But yes, you have like I learned to use that. And that was pretty much it. It was like, pretty straightforward to get started contributing. Like everyone else, I also had a positive experience with the community. And my mentor used to give like, feedback at least once a week, but it was very difficult for her, like as I mentioned, because like a lot of people were contributing, and she would end up with like an aching neck each time she sat down to give feedback. But I had like, great experience. And honestly, I'm not even like, a CSD student. I see like, I saw a lot of comments in the chat. People were asking about like, how much experience do you need? And there were people who were like, a lot more experienced with design than me. It's just that I worked hard during that time, and I think like, I got around to doing some good work. So that is why I got selected. But when I started out, I did not really have any experience. Like I did have some experience, but I did not have like, a lot of experience with design. I did not know how to use the tool that Fedora uses at all. So yeah, I think like even as a complete beginner, you can start contributing to Fedora, and the community is amazing.
The last logo is of UNICEF Office of Innovation. So that is where I interned in last year. And I worked, they have a few different projects. The Office of Innovation has a few different projects, but I contributed to the Digital Public Goods Project, which is basically any software or program which helps to solve any of the sustainable development goals are called digital public goods, and they kind of fund these programs, and they put them up on their website, and people from the open source community who would like to add on and work upon these projects to develop them, that's sort of what they do. They organize and collect all of these different goods, and I worked on their website. So yeah, I also was pretty inexperienced in web development when I started contributing, and I sort of learned as and when I was contributing. So initially I started out with very small contributions. For example, I just had to change the padding of a button in the web page. That was the first contribution that I made, and from that I went to designing and adding a whole new page to the application, and that was during my contribution period, like during the 2 weeks of my contribution period in itself. So yeah, it was a very good confidence boost for me to see that I could learn this much in such a short period of time. And then I went on to like when I had to actually look at their code and integrate some of my code with it, it was like kind of intimidating to go through the whole code base once, and I did get stuck a lot of times. But yeah, my community was also very, very supportive, and every time I could not understand a line of code or was stuck somewhere, my mentor would always help me out and get back to me as soon as possible. And I also got the chance to interact with people from a lot of other countries as well. Like the whole UNICEF Office of Innovation has people who work remotely from different countries, different time zones, and they set up different chat sessions for us. We had coffee chats where we would talk to some people. Sometimes we talk to people from the design leads, sometimes the marketing leads or the data science leads. And yeah, it was a very good networking opportunity, and I got to know experts in all of these different fields. And yeah, overall it was a very wholesome experience. And in the end, when I presented my project in the final week, it was great. Like the people were really supportive, and they even now, like my mentor told me about how they tested out the final product on other people and how they're liking the product. So yeah, it was a great experience all in all.
Okay, so this reminds me of my first contribution. So I just had to write like 700 lines of comment. That's it. So what the comment was, so it actually the strings are translatable in all like open source projects. So what my work was, so say a string is there, I have to write the same string above and like write additional 1 or 2 words of comment. And I had to do this repetitive task 700 times. So this was very like irritating at times, but like I took my time and like wrote that. So initially you don't have to like be very experts in programming. I didn't had any understanding of what I'm doing. They just told me that this is a translatable text and you just have to write a comment above that. And you have to do this 700 times because there are 700 such strings. And that was my first contribution. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to be like experts in programming while starting, right? And at the end, like we all are. I participate in GSoC and she participated in Outreachy. Yeah.
Something similar happened with me. Like my first contribution was fixing typos in their website. I fixed one typo, then another typo, then another. Then I was like, okay, there are a lot of repositories, lot of typos. I just made an automation bot to find all the typos and make the PRs for that. That was my first
That's really
contribution.
creative.
Yeah,
Modern problems require modern solutions.
modern solution. I just made a bot to read all the readmes and run a spell checker on them, and then give 5 to 6 suggested words and then replace them automatically.
Okay, so I'd like to like mention that I had a mentor when I was contributing. His nickname is Alan on IRC, so I'll call him Alan. So initially, I was very bad at communication. So he was the one who said that. I mean, he said something, and I used to feel like, is he scolding me or something? I mean, I was not even sure what he's trying to tell me because of different cultures that we have. So he was from France, and I mean, my English used to sound to him like something like, I mean, I don't know. He might have felt offended a few times. So it's uh, a very important advice that initially write all things like use formal communication. That's it. So initially don't use smileys or I mean don't use any like informal words like I mean what we write in chats, right? So it's also a chat. IRC is also a chat, but don't use chat language there. So you have to write full
Yeah,
words,
please
you have
avoid
to write
using
full
humor.
sentences, right? So initially I was not like I was okay. I mean, they're also using emojis. I can also use emojis, right? But they are like friends for maybe 10 years, maybe 6 years. You are new to this organization. So initially, I mean, so I was talking to him about this. So I told him that I'm going to talk in a session tomorrow. He said, "Do you remember how you were when you first came here? So what will you tell them the most important thing? What will you tell them?" So I said communication is the key, and he said, "Yeah, gotcha." So it was a very nice memory. So I mean, initially I felt like is he scolding me or something, but like later on I came to know that yeah, I mean, initially I should have been more formal, and towards the end now I can like very well communicate as others communicate, but initially you should be like much more formal to them.
So this is actually quite a coincidence, but when I thought about the most important thing that I would want to share about my internship, I wanted to say the exact same thing, that communication is key. And that's also one thing I learned. So for me as a person working on projects and working in large groups, I feel like a lot of conflicts arise, and working with different people who have different working styles and communicating with all of them. And it's even different, even harder when it comes to an organization like this, because then you're doing what is called cross cultural communication. And although I had a very sweet mentor, but sometimes I did feel myself getting very self conscious. Also, I'm a very frank person, so for me to actually think strategically about how I should be conveying something, and not just saying that particular thing, and just getting my point across properly, that was something that I had to put a lot of thought into. And I feel the entire experience made me a lot better at communicating. Also, somewhere in the beginning, when Rajata was just explaining what open source is, she mentioned that open source is collaborative work, so you have to be communicating well. And also I feel this is something that I will always be taking away, no matter where I'm working. Learning how to communicate with people is very important. So yeah, that is something that I also felt through my journey was very important. And that my journey with open source just started with me as a first year. I had no idea what is open source. I had no idea how to use GitHub or anything. Honestly, I had a very small skill set. I just saw that a lot of seniors, a lot of very cool seniors who I admire a lot, are doing something called GSoC or Outreachy or something like that. And
Plus one. Plus one on that.
I had no idea what is this, what are you doing, how do you all build something like that. Even when I read about it, And I had this funny conversation with my mentor later while, like, I was telling her about this. And she said that, like, she was with another very senior person. And that person said that, like, she's spent like 30 years working with open source communities, managing them. She's worked in tech roles. And she still doesn't know what open source is for sure. And, like, whenever she thinks she has it down, there's, like, some new addition to it. And, like, it just grows bigger. So, like, yeah, I think if, like, you're in this session right now and you're feeling confused, I think that confusion is, like, something that everyone goes through at some point of time. And the best way to clear out that confusion is to get started.
I almost had the same thing to say. Like the best thing for me in this was learning good social interaction and communication skills. Like I was really anxious in the beginning. I don't know how to talk with them in the video chat. Like how do I ask them and ask what? They would be judging me. And also during the project, I learned to acknowledge different opinions and suggestions from different people in the project. Since we have to analyze different approaches to solve a problem along with their pros and cons, and then talk to a lot of people to arrive at a common approach. Since in my project, the whole community was involved in building that particular PDF for them. And another word of advice would be like just be consistent. My organization used to have a lot of Zoom call meetings every week. Even before the application period, I would always try to participate in at least 3 to 4 meetings, and they were really welcoming about it. I used to work on my communication skills and also make minor contributions to the code, ask doubts in email threads. Basically, making your community aware of your presence and your efforts, that is surely going to help you.
Yeah, so I think what you should be taking away from this discussion was that everyone feels hesitant while communicating their ideas when they have to first write even their introductory message on the chat that I am so and so person, and even just introducing themselves is kind of anxiety inducing. So yeah, you don't have to feel like you're alone in this or you're the only one experiencing this. We all have gone through it, and even your peers who will be competing with you in Outreachy will be a little hesitant in communicating. And everyone is a little intimidated and not very sure about their having all the knowledge in a specific domain. So yeah, don't be too focused on like I have to be an expert at this before I can commit to this. If you're in your first year and you're having doubts that okay, I don't think I can do this at all, it sounds too big or too intimidating, don't be intimidated. We were all in that place once, and yeah, just like give it a shot, give it your best shot, and then see how it goes. You will, even if you don't get selected, you will get something out of the experience for sure. Yeah, that's all.
Right. So
Yeah. Also,
that's a very
she
important
go ahead.
point. Yeah, so that's a very important point. So even if you don't get selected, you'll still get a lot of experience. So that is very important to like know. So I mean, you might feel that there are 20 people in my group or my project, and only two are going to be selected. So why am I even here if I'm not in the competition? You'll still get to learn a lot. You might participate in another program and then get selected there, or not even that. So these experiences will help you throughout your life, I believe. So if I had not participated in this organization, or I hadn't, I mean, then I would have made the same mistakes in the like industry. So when I go to say I'll be interning with Microsoft this year, so when I go to Microsoft, I would have done the same things, right? So it's a good place to learn. That's the thing, and no one is judging you there. No one knows you. No one knows about your existence. That's the great thing, and no one cares if you never come to them again. So I mean, that's a great place to learn. So I mean, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, I completely agree with Harsh. In fact, like, about this, like, about learning with open source, I think one of the best things about, like, the summer of code programs is the mentors. And your mentors stay with you. Like, just yesterday, I had, like, a 2 hour long talk with my mentor. Like, we're still in touch. We, like, try to meet every month. And she helps me a lot with things like, these days we, like, just catch up and meet. But, like, she helps me a lot with, like, helping me, like when I share something with her, she still, like, helps me out about how I should be behaving professionally, and she shares a lot of advice. Also in terms of, like, growth, I remember that like this was something I did not know when, like, I applied to Outreach, or even when I got selected. But when you intern with some organizations, they allow you to go to a conference, like they pay for your visit to like an international conference and you'll be a speaker there. So that is also a great like learning experience. In my case, this happened online, so that was a little, no, very sad. But like, it's still a great experience that like, you're speaking in an international conference, and you're speaking to a lot of people. So even though mine was online, it was still like a really nice experience. So and a lot of organizations offer things like this to their to the people who are interning with them. So that's another thing that is like very unique and that offers a lot of growth with these organizations.
Yeah, and just don't lose hope if you don't get selected. Like I applied in second year and I exactly did what Dharya said not to do. I just contributed a lot and I just disappeared. I was not in touch with my mentor. So I did not get selected that time. But this time I knew those mistakes and I always kept communication a top priority.
One more thing, so the organization that I interned with, another senior had interned there just like, very previous year. And she's like, very talented, much more experienced designer than me. She had worked on a similar project. And that was her second time, like, contributing as well. First time she did not get selected. But when I spoke to her, she gave me like, a lot of advice, because like, it was a second time contributing to Outreachy, and like she came as like, someone who was experienced. So like she told me that it was a lot easier for her to contribute and get selected when she was contributing for the second round. So if you don't get selected once and you have to contribute for another year, your chances of getting selected are actually higher because you're coming with some experience.
Hi. So I think there were so many questions in the chat about beginners, how like what is the roadmap for beginners, what are the prerequisites. Though I think it has been beautifully covered by all of you, telling all of your stories when all of you were beginners, when you were starting, you did not know about the project so much. Still, you went ahead, contributed, learned on the go. But any small things that you would like to share about complete beginners who are just in their first years, who would like to contribute to Google Summer of Code or Outreachy? It would be great.
So yes, so we have a question in the chat. So are we assigned mentors or do we have to look for them? So I mean, when I say mentors, I say like two types of mentors are there. One which are assigned by the so they are like bound to help you, and the others are like past alumni who have contributed to that and people like that. So maybe your seniors in the college, they can help you with that if they have contributed to the same or maybe similar org. And the others are like appointed by the organizations for these specific programs. So if I talk about GSoC, so in my project there were two mentors who were assigned specifically for GSoC, and there were two more people who were project maintainers. So they are like usually concerned about whatever is going on. So they are always ready to help. So I mean, others can comment over it.
Yeah, so like clarifying, it depends on like, also what you're referring to with mentor. So if you're like, going there for a project like GSoC and Outreachy, yeah, then you will get a mentor like, who is assigned to a project. But if you just want to contribute to open source for growth, or you're doing it like, before one of these programs begin, then you can look for a mentor, but like, there won't be any mentors as such, like, who are just mentors in that organization, like that their role is mentor.
Also, another thing is if you want someone to proofread your code or help you out with something while building the project, you can also reach out to people from LinkedIn. Like they have the list of the past interns on their websites, on the Outreachy website at least, and then there you can find the past people who have contributed to that organization, and you can get in touch with them on LinkedIn and ask them what they did specifically, what that helped them stand out in that specific organization, and if they can proofread your proposal or final application and help you out with a few of the contributions. I think that's also a good idea. I did that with Wikimedia.
Okay, so that's a very good question. So I mean, how to like select the organization or the project? So I mean, for me, it was like I knew someone who was contributing to KD. So like it was, I mean, I felt that whatever he's doing, I am capable of doing the same. So that's how I chose this org. And other than that, like I told you, so just like try to set up the project and I mean, first filter out the projects according to your tech stack and then try to set up those projects. So if you can set up those projects, then I mean, there's 90% chance that you can contribute to it too. So yeah.
For me, the decision was like, driven by the project that was being offered by the organization and like the support that I was getting from the mentor. So like I actually almost like did not want to be like going for Fedora because like somebody told me that's very competitive and I was scared. But then I really liked the project, so I really wanted to go for it as well. And slowly, like as time went by, for some community I did not like the atmosphere that much. I liked it better in the other communities. For one community I did not think that the mentor was that supportive, and they hadn't created like that was that particular community, it was their first time with Outreachy. So they hadn't created a chat, and their tasks were kind of haphazard. So I was like, I don't feel supported here. So that's how I ended up going for that project. And initially, when I selected the three projects that I thought I will be contributing to, I thought about the workload that will come with the projects and what I want to be doing in the future. And for example, there were some projects which had to do with like Linux kernel and stuff. And although that is interesting, that is not really up my alley. Like that's not what I wanted to be doing. So I found a project that I liked, that wouldn't feel like very heavy for me during this time, and that I felt like I could actually enjoy doing, and I could also still be learning from, and that would help me with my future. So that is how I decided on my community. It was basically based on the project they were offering.
Right. So I mean, it's like very different for different people. So I mean, if you ask like others also, I mean, it's very different for different people, right? So it can be something that you are already using. Say I was using LibreOffice at that time. I was using Linux like a lot. So I was using LibreOffice. So I tried to set up this LibreOffice project in my system, and I failed. So I mean, for me, it was always about like trying to set up these projects, and if I'm able to set up the project, and I'm not like intimidated by the size of code, then I thought like, okay, I should try to set. I mean, I can contribute to this. That's how I thought.
All right, so I understand sometimes terminology can be very confusing, and Aniket is asking what do you mean by contributing? So contributing just means what contributing in English means that you are offering something to the organization. So the organization will have some issues, some projects that you can work on, and when you're working on those, that's when it means that you're contributing to the organization.
Right, and I mean, contribution can be of any form. Like maybe there I used to design stuff for that organization, and I can write some code. Someone can provide some translations. Someone can document the code. I mean, and Rachita was talking about management contributions. So you have to manage stuff. I mean, these organizations also have to. They also have a management side, right? So they are also like proper uh, industry organizations that we have. Say, I mean, any popular organization.
I
Translation
think
is
there
the
was
right
a
word.
Yeah, so I think there was a question in the chat earlier that all of you might have the time period of GSoC and Outreachy usually clashes with the placement and the internship period that is going on in college. So how did you manage to do both of them at the same time?
Yeah, right. So that's a very important question. So when I was starting in December, I knew that this is going to clash with my internship preparation. So I had to choose, right? So what am I going to do I mean, in that specific period from May to say August. So the program was announced for May to project. So May to August. So I was like, I had to choose one thing because I mean, it's very difficult to uh, do both the things like at full capacity. So you cannot prepare for interviews at full capacity and at the same time like contribute to these projects. So what I did was I prepared whatever I had to before starting. I mean, before May, before June, and then during May June period, I just had to revise those concepts. So I already solved a lot of questions before, and during that time, during May and June, I just had to give a few contests. I mean, I was not studying, so that's what I'm trying to say. I was not actively studying, but just revising and participating in contests. So, I mean, that's already a lot of time if you think about it. But I mean, other than that, if you are not prepared already and then you start preparing for your interviews in May and June, and side by side, you are also participating in these open source programs, then I think it might get difficult. I mean, for others, it might be different experience, but I would say that uh, you have time right now, right? So just prepare for your interviews or do a lot of questions right now. And when the time comes, you can then focus more on your contributions and you will not be like this, you won't have this pressure, I mean, on your head that you have to study these things as well. So that's a good point, I believe.
Yeah, also like adding, like I completely agree with like what Harsh said. So when I mentioned that like my project, I chose it keeping in mind that like I will be preparing for internships in the same time. But despite that, I had actually started preparing like back in like actually I prepared for Google Step. So I prepared very hard at that time because तब break चल रहा था. And afterwards, like I kept practicing, I kept giving contests, and I was fairly regular. But even so, like I wanted to cover some more concepts, and I wanted to like keep practicing regularly. And honestly, like it took a toll on me, like trying to like deliver at the internship, and also like prepare for the internships, because I wanted to do well in both cases. And it was a very difficult time, and honestly like the following semester I was very burned out. So I would like suggest managing your time very like well, and being very strategic about it. And sometimes you just like have to like let a few things go. Like if I think about like back then, I did not know how to say like no in my internship. So even if like there were some things that were not a part of my internship, but like were contributions to Fedora, I would like go for it. I was attending websites and apps team meetings for God knows what reason. I was attending Fedora India meetings. I don't know why I was there. I made some things for them. I have no idea what I was doing and why I was doing that, but I was doing a lot of extra work, which like I could have skipped on, and that would have probably like been better for my mental health and peace. So you have to consider all these things, and you have to like if you value like a getting an internship from like the campus or something like that, then you like have to like prepare. Apart from that, you can get like there's a chance that you could get a returning offer from your organization, like you can't do GSoC or something again, but you can do another internship with them. So like yesterday my mentor was asking me if I have an internship for the summer, and like if I would like to work with Fedora again. And I have an internship, but like there are offers like that, and your mentors can help you find like other things as well, like, and there are other open source programs as well in which you can get involved. So it's not like it's the full stop with campus placements.
Right. So also, I mean, you'll have to, I mean, make a balance. So, uh, like let's keep the preparations aside when the actual, I mean, season starts. So there are like 10 tests scheduled in 3 4 days. And at that time you cannot contribute, right? So I mean, even if you're not actively preparing for it, you'll have to maybe prepare your resumes at the end because there will be some updates required, and you'll have to apply on this on those portals. So each company has their own portal and you have to apply there as well before I mean applying through your campus website. So I mean, there's a lot of work involved there as well. So you have to like give those tests. So each day there will be at least like, I mean, in the initial few days there are at least like 1 or 2 tests daily, and maybe even more than that. So, I mean, you'll have to sacrifice a few things. So, in that time, I didn't contribute much to my project. So, I mean, they also, I also received a feedback for the same thing in the end. They said that you didn't mention that you were going to participate in the internship season. So, it's like better to even like make this clear in your timeline that I'll be busy for uh, maybe the first week or the first 2 weeks of July. So, I won't be contributing much. So, I mean, it might be a good idea to mention this in your proposal as well. I didn't mention this, so they gave me a review about this. So I actually like completed my work, which was in the timeline later. So actually, I got late in my contributions, but it's fine because I had extra buffer time in the end, which I was talking about earlier.
I think it's 5:40 already, and I think we've gone a little over the board. But I think it was a really nice session, really nice informative session. Plus, the experience that you all shared, it was amazing. Even I got to learn so much that, and also like in every internship experience, the trajectory that we all follow, like from the beginning, when we know nothing, and at the end of the internship, and we've learned so much. So that experience is so fulfilling, and hearing about all of your experiences makes that a lot more wholesome. So I think first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here, for spending a lot more time to give us this session. And I'd also like to tell the audience that we have the slides and the YouTube live sessions recording and the link below. And if you have any questions, any further feedback, anything that you want to talk to these speakers, I think you all have their mail IDs. You all have their telegrams or hangouts. You can mail them anytime you want, and you can get some real feedback on the proposal that you're writing, or anytime if you feel stuck. We've got a really amazing IIIT community where we can at least unblock if there is any problem that you're facing. So if there are any last minute comments that our speakers would like to give.
I don't have anything to add as such, but thanks for having us, and thanks for having us share everything, because like it will probably be very helpful with the juniors, and it's also good to share things so thanks. It was a great experience for us as well.
Yeah, right. So I
Yeah,
agree with
and
that. Yeah, and sorry. So I mean, to all the people who are still watching, like, thank you all for staying till the end.
Yeah, thank you so much.
yeah, I remember being in your shoes at some point. So yeah, it was really nice for me to be able to help some of you guys. And if you still have any doubts, then you can shoot us an email, and we'll try our best to help you out with it. And all the best with the applications.
Great. I think we can call this off. So all the best to everyone. Thank you so much for being here.